In the game Dungeons & Dragons, the party comes across an encounter that doesn't go in their favor. Somebody asks, "Hey, get the cleric to heal us so we can continue on." What? Nobody played the cleric? We didn't hire an NPC to heal us? Well, the cleric is often looked as the healer of the party, but they are much, much more than that. And that's what we're going to discuss here now, the pros and cons of the cleric. And let's begin. Hello, I'm Greg. Welcome to Introductions to Dungeons & Dragons 1st and 2nd edition, the cleric, the priest of the party. As I stated, they're just not the healer of the group. They're much more than that. But let's start off with just the basics. One of the advantages of the cleric is off of the to-hit chart. They have a better chance of hitting the magic users and thieves, very close to fighters. So get them alongside the fighters to fight. Another advantage is they can use any armor, from leather all the way up to full plate if you choose to do so, without restriction. The other thing is weapons. This is where it gets a little complicated. All good clerics, depending on their mythos, can only use blunt weapons. The mace, the flail, the staff, the club. I allow the sling with round stones, blunt stones, not sharp bullets. Well, I want to use a sword, you say. I'll say, well, the good clerics cannot use piercing or slicing weapons because they don't want to shed blood. That is frowned upon. Sometimes when they're fighting, let's say, some bandits, you pummel them into submission, where a thief will most likely kill them. A fighter of neutral alignment or chaotic neutral alignment, a barbarian, will just keep smashing until the bandit is no longer a threat, which is dead. A cleric of good alignment might be like, okay, surrender. And if they do, they'll take them to the proper authorities or deal out punishments at that particular time, depending on what is needed. Clerics of evil alignment, yes, you'll see them using ceremonial daggers or some sort, but I try not to have evil clerics in my party group, usually for the NPCs. That's very disruptive in a party. The other advantage of a cleric is every race can be one, except one. But first you have halflings, gnomes, dwarves, humans, elves, half-orc shamans, which are a cleric. But a wild elf, you would think that would be the perfect cleric. You know, nature and all that good happy stuff. But for some reason, in Unearthed Arcana, they mark the wild elf no. But, oh well, them's the rules. But if you choose to have the wild elf as a cleric, then by all means do it, because it's your game, your world. All races have limited levels for clerics, except humans can be completely unlimited. And one elf category, a female drow elf, can be unlimited in clerical levels, where the male drow is limited to 6th, 7th, depending on your wisdom. Again, I don't know why they did that, but the female drow is already very powerful with all its innate abilities. But with her going unlimited, a 12th, 15th, 20th level cleric with all those abilities, whoo, man, pretty nasty. And did I use them as an NPC? Darn right I do. They make excellent adversaries. But all races, but wild elf, limited to blunt weapons, any armor. But what other abilities do they have that are overlooked? Well, spells. Unlike a magic user that needs to open their spell book, read the spell for several hours to put back in the memory, priests do not. They pray for their spells. In the evening, they'll sit down and meditate, pray to their deity. And let's say one day they need a cure light wounds, a cure poison, and purify water. They go on their adventure, they use those spells. They have the option of choosing something different. They're not limited to what's in a spell book like the wizards are. So let's say the next day they need a resist cold and maybe 2 cure light wounds. Say they're going up against some kind of ice creature. Choose useful spells, not just always heal, heal, heal. One of the most overlooked spell out there, and I even throw them in as a scroll every now and then, but again, about magic items, don't tuck them away, use them, is speak with the dead. The dead have so many clues that the players overlook. Say there's a freshly dead body there, and there's a mysterious door. Wow, wonder what happened. Hey, let's speak to this guy. Hey, what happened? Oh, the door killed me. Oh, let's look at the door. Oh, they discovered the door is trapped. Or speak to the dead again. Hey, you're the bad guy. Where's your leader at? Who's your leader? Like say, oh, it's, Bart Simpson. He's the leader, So, speak with dead. Very, very helpful. Yes, it doesn't do anything for combat, but it does so much more for the game. Sometimes it's hysterical. Sometimes it's very helpful. Just depends on the use. And of course, as the higher levels you go up, you get better healing spells. A heal spell, resurrection. Very, very powerful, especially when the party is in dire needs and needs that. The other important thing about spell casting for clerics, just like the wizards, if you are in the middle of combat, you can't cast spells. If you are casting a spell before combat, you lose your dexterity armor class because you're focusing on the spell. So it's basically whatever armor you are wearing. If the spell is disruptive, it is lost. I do a little different. Let's say the monster has the initiative and the player hasn't had a chance to cast the spell yet, and the monster, say, hits him with a ranged weapon or whatever. The spell wasn't cast yet, so I still allow that spell to be in memory. It's just one of those little perks I do for the players. But if it was so many increments apart and the spell was being cast, yes, it is then lost. It fizzles out to nothing. Alignments of the clerics, good alignments. There is a penalty for those type of spells. If a lawful good character goes into a tavern, tries to get some information, becomes disgruntled against this guy in the bar who's kind of being rude, disruptive, and the cleric gets ticked off and punches him. Starts a fist fight. Well, not good for the cleric. He might lose some spells as a penalty. He goes to cast a resist cold and it's not there. He might get a warning in a dream. He might need from his deity to repent, give his treasure to whatever, sacrifice a magic item, depending on the severity of his inaction. A chaotic good cleric might give misinformation on purpose to a town that for some reason they didn't want them to go near a graveyard, but people get hurt. It's a tough one, but probably penalized with some magic spells. Again, stay true to the alignment, true to the persona of the character, and try not to get penalized. But the third most important thing about a cleric is its ability to turn undead. What is turn undead? Let's say you have 4 skeletons coming at you. The cleric declares, I want to turn undead, pulls its holy symbol out. There's no initiative penalty. It is what it is, whatever you roll. If you roll a 4, it's a 4. If you roll a 5, it's a 5. The cleric rolls the 20-sided dice. If it's successful, like say if it needs a 14 or higher, rolls a 15. You roll the 6-sided dice twice, and that many, let's say you roll 5, so all 4 skeletons are pushed away into a corner as the cleric declares. Now, if a player character decides to attack that skeleton's no longer turned and it will attack the player. If the cleric attacks the skeletons, then all the skeletons attack. If the cleric pushes all the skeletons to the side of the room, the party safely goes on, then the cleric backs out of the room, shuts the door, there goes the encounter. If the cleric is in high enough level, it can automatically turn the skeletons. Then you would roll the 6-sided dice twice. Or even higher, it can automatically destroy the skeletons, zombies or ghouls. The skeletons, poof, burst into dust, fall down in many bones. Zombies, blip, just fall down. Ghouls, they just tumble over and are destroyed. That's the ability of the cleric. If, let's say you come across a vampire, you try to turn it, you fail, you cannot turn it again unless several days go by and it's a totally separate encounter. Only can turn undead once per encounter. The cleric can also attempt tiny amount of percentage turn an outer planar being, a devil, a demon, whatever. 19, 20, 18 on a 20-sided dice, you can turn them away. Let's say the big encounter is a minor demon. You come in there and player character rolls a 20, which I've had that happen before, and the devil's poof, sent away. Not destroyed, sent away. Well, darn, there goes my big battle scene, and the players rejoice, yay! By one roll of the dice. Nobody else had to do anything, and the rest of the group's like, yay, we're alive. It happens. That's the fun part of it. Enjoy it. Clerics can have all kinds of different personas. You can have the overeager acolyte. Come on, let's go to hell. I want to fight some devils and demons. No. No. But they can be overzealous. They can be righteous. Like, yes, we're here to save the town from the dead in the graveyard. Stuff like that. Just play the character right. They're not just healers. They're also fighters. Get them into combat. Don't have them stand back. Use a variety of spells. Change them up from night to night or whenever your deity requires prayer. One of the things that I do is if they don't recognize their deity enough and they go to pray for spells, they don't get them. They get a warning, a dream, nasty dream. Like, why aren't you paying attention to me? Well, if you're not paying attention to me, I'm not paying attention to you. So the clerics are fun to play. Stay true to the alignment. If you have any questions, ask below. Other than that, if you want a really excellent fantasy story, which, yes, I do have clerics in there, tomesofahir.com, and I'll see you on my next video. Other than that, thank you for watching. Example of playing a cleric. So let's say you're going into the door and you know what's on the other side. Let's say a Spinagon. So you have the party members. The cleric knows the fighter's going to be going up against this the most. So it casts protection from evil on that fighter. But then he casts a prayer spell amongst the party, which is surrounded by himself. A prayer spell will give +2 to the entire party, +2 to hit, +2 to damage, -2 on their initiatives, +2 to their saving throws, gives an advantage before going into the room. Then the priest or cleric may cast Sanctuary on himself, so they will be, for a certain amount of rounds, the Spinagon won't attack them. So it'll give the cleric chances to give some good hits, hopefully roll some good 20s on against them, or to be able to cast that spell, a heal spell or something, to that fighter or a magic user or whatever is going on. But when you know you're going up against something powerful, cast some spells 1 round, 2 rounds before you're going in. That definitely helps. Hope it works.